O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Yonder is the sea, great and wide. Creeping things innumerable are there, living things both small and great. There go the ships and the Leviathan, which you made to sport in it. These all look to you, to give them their food in due season. When you give to them, they gather it up. When you open your hand, they are filled with good things. Hi, my name is Reverend Sheila Spencer, and I am the interim president of Disciples on Missions. The Blue Theology Mission Station is a mission center affiliated with Disciples on Missions, and it's located on the southern tip of the Monterey Bay in Pacific Grove, California. Church youth groups from the United States and Canada make pilgrimages to the Blue Theology Mission Station to enjoy a learning servant week in one of the ocean's unique and abundant ecosystems. For over 10 years, youth have immersed themselves in learning about God's gift of the ocean, how Christians are called to be good stewards of, and offer themselves to the service of caring for God's magnificent ocean as citizen scientists and Blue theologians. We hope that your youth group can make plans to visit the Blue Theology Mission Station sometime soon. I am pleased to introduce to you the director of the Blue Theology Mission Station, Reverend Dan Paul.
Disciples Home Missions is hands-on missions. I'm Dan Paul. I'm the director of the Blue Theology Mission Station here on the southern tip of the Monterey Bay in Pacific Grove, California. We offer learning, serving experiences in Blue Theology. That is, a place where ocean stewardship is seen through the lens of Christian concern. During this pandemic, for the coastal people of God, the brink of the Monterey Bay is a safe and healthy place to dwell and to reflect, a place to allow the ocean to be a living call to worship. Whenever a youth group arrives here for a week of learning and serving, we take a walk to the rocky coast, find a quiet place to sit in solitude. And each young person is asked to write down how the ocean reminds us of God. These words always come up: grand, peaceful, powerful, never-ending, abiding, calming, challenging, inviting. Isaiah said, "Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you." Catherine of Siena wrote, "You, O eternal Trinity, are a deep into which the more I enter, the more I find, and the more I find, the more I seek. O abyss, O eternal Godhead, O sea profound, what more could you give me than yourself? God's grace, unsought and unearned, blows through my life, and all I need to do is raise my sails to catch the full wind." Hymnist Dan Damon wrote this while driving along the Monterey Bay from Santa Cruz to Pacific Grove. "When our temples totter, Christ of wind and water, calm the earth and soothe our shattered nerves. And when I'm listening, walking, praying needs no talking, wonder at the depth and and breath of love. Ocean is a call to worship every morning, evening. In its rising, falling, hear the Spirit breathing. Church, the Blue Theology Mission Station is here to serve you, to give you a chance to deepen your love for God's great gift of the ocean, and to have life-changing experiences where ocean is a call to worship. Okay. So the big news for I'm going to read this chat real quick. Oh, those seals. The big news for us, the Blue Theology Mission Station, is, we are still a ministry of the Christian Church of Pacific Grove. But in the last year, we have become a full-blown affiliate of Disciples Home Missions, which means we're a recognized mission center of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. So that's very exciting. And so we are now the mission station in California. And so we're very thrilled about that. What was great for me was that once we've become an official mission station, I get to attend meetings with the Disciples Home Missions. And of course, we do that through Zoom. And I'm meeting people who are also affiliated in all kinds of different ways. And at one of the meetings, next thing you know, I'm getting texts and going back and forth with our guest tonight, Shanta, who is a director of Creation Justice Ministries. And she recognized right away that we had a serious partnership to explore. And she was right. And we're just so thrilled that we have this connection, and we're looking at all the ways that we can appreciate our shared ministry. And so I want to give her time. I want to give you time to meet her and for her to tell you a few things. She has young children at home, and before they get squirrely and wonder why their mom's on the computer so long, I'm gonna turn the screen over to her. So Shanta, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And speaking of getting to know each other a little better, I would really value if you're all willing to put in the chat just where you're coming in from. I don't know who's on, and so it would really be helpful for me to see where you are and what ministry you are connected with. So just drop that information into the chat, direct it to all panelists and attendees. And while I wait for that information to come in, I will tell you a little bit about Creation Justice Ministries. So we are an outgrowth of the National Council of Churches USA, and the Christian Church Disciples of Christ co-founded our ecumenical ministry. We bring together more than 24 faith-based communities from Orthodox, mainline Protestant, historically Black church, Peace, and Baptist traditions. And through our members, which our membership mirrors that of the National Council of Churches USA, we have a responsibility to serve about 100,000 congregations and 30 million people. And some of them are you. So I'm really glad to encounter you today on Zoom. Our work spans many issue areas, including climate, energy, environmental health and toxics, water, and ocean conservation, as well as endangered species and public lands and waters conservation. So obviously our partnership with the Blue Theology Mission Station primarily focuses on ocean issues, and that is what I will focus on while I'm sharing with you today. But I will also share with you some information that is relevant to California. And hopefully, most of you are Californians and not Nevadans, but I haven't seen anything in the chat yet, except for Dan. Thank you for participating. Thank you, Carl. Carl is from Vallejo. Oh, and people are putting it into the Q&A, I see. Chat is disabled.
Yeah, for some of them, the chat isn't working, I guess.
We'll
let Jim figure that out.
Okay. I wonder, since it's a small enough group, if it's possible to change the settings in here so we can see each other. We'll see if Jim, I'll defer to Jim on that. So.
No, the most that we can do is if somebody had a question and you want it, we can give somebody permission to use their video, but because
Okay.
of the webinar format, it's typically us and then them watching us.
Got it. Okay. So very helpful to see where people are from. Thank you. Looks like we are all Californians. Yes. Great. So Creation Justice Ministries, thank you for sharing, everybody. We have been exploring this partnership with the Blue Theology Mission Station, and we're just in our first year, and I feel that we're just getting started. We're going to be launching a lot more activities together in the coming years. But we have decided to collaborate in ecumenical ministry to connect more religious denominations involved in our membership with Blue Theology, as well as to provide some of the core functions that our ministry does with Blue Theology that complements what they do. So while Blue Theology Mission Station specializes in fostering a spiritual reflection with the ocean, doing theological reflection and worship, doing citizen science activities, Creation Justice Ministries tends to do things that have they're more related to advocacy. So we have added a civic education component to the Blue Theology curriculum and have encouraged people who participate in the experience at Blue Theology to continue to share their information through advocacy platforms about why God's creation is sacred along the coasts and how you feel about protecting those places. Creation Justice Ministries is very active in campaigns at the state as well as national level on protecting 30% of land and ocean areas by no later than 2030. And happily, just today, if you've checked the news, you might have seen that Governor Gavin Newsom made an announcement that he will pursue that goal through an executive order for the state of California to conserve more than 30% of the lands and waters under California stewardship. And in fact, Reverend Dan Paul made a statement about it, and you can find it on our blog. I'll drop that link into the chat. It's just one example of our many partnerships together. So Creation Justice Ministries is also working on there is a resolution to protect 30% of God's creation in the United States stewardship, both land and ocean, by 2030. This metric, many scientists came to this metric, and it's been one that's been discussed in the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, and we're hoping that the US will adopt it as the state of California has done. So we are trying to spread the word about it and build the moral case for it within religious communities. So we, I find this format very challenging because I can't see you and I can't tell if you're with me. So
We're with you.
Okay.
Here, I'll come on.
Okay. So my colleague Amanda, who has been working with Dan most of the time, shared some suggestions about possibly talking about engaging the media on issues that we care about related to stewardship of God's marine creation. I could also talk about some of the best messaging practices that we have learned about. I could also talk a little bit about some racial justice issues that I've been working on. in the context of the California Native Truth and Healing Council, which will be emerging at the end of this year. I'd kind of be interested in taking the pulse of this group to know what would be most useful to you for me to cover during our time together.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. Jan Warren is here, who invited me to participate in a forum in Lafayette, and we watched the movie The Story of Plastics together.
Mm-hmm.
And it became abundantly clear that while recycling and limiting the use of plastics is important, it's even more important to know how to lobby to get some kind of controls on how much plastic's being produced.
Yeah.
And so if you could just, because I know you do that for a living. I mean, a big part of what you do is effectively persuade political leaders on environmental issues. So if you could give us some pointers on how to
I don't do
effectively
it.
communicate.
I educate and equip people like you to do it. So. So that's part of what we can do together here. We can talk about plastics. I see Virginia Farley said she would like to talk Indigenous issues, and Carl would like to know how can our church help. So that's just very helpful to have a little bit of connecting points on where you want me to go with this and how to make it relevant to you. So I can start with your question, Dan. So I wish there were more legislative pathways to dealing with the plastics problem. The most compelling ones that I have heard of are not very politically viable right now, and they would be to make corporations responsible for the full life cycle of their product. So they would have to think through what happens to the plastic packaging after it's done. Is there a return system so that it can be recycled by the manufacturer? Or are they going to pay into some sort of US recycling program? But unfortunately, these policy ideas and plans are still pretty nascent as far as I understand. Dan, if you have followed the plastics issue more closely than I have, please add information. But as far as Creation Justice Ministries is understanding it, it is not politically viable enough yet to spend a lot of our time pushing on that one, unfortunately. So we have mostly been focusing on educating people, and then there are, yes, Virginia, that is a very important point. At the local level, there is a lot more that you can do. Creation Justice Ministries mostly works at the federal level. So the ban on plastic bags, critical. And many cities and counties are taking that up. And the state of California, I believe, has considered it. They've also considered banning styrofoam, right? So, yeah. So I think there is more that can be done, but at the federal level, less so. Another thing here, Kimberly says, a local PG issue is the development of a large hotel impacting seal harbors. How do we lobby for harbor seals, puppying area? How do we lobby for protection? Pacific Grove. Okay, got it. Great. Jan Warren says there is a federal bill on plastics. Okay. So interesting. Okay. So I will put my contact information in the chat. That I can do. This is my email address. Okay. So I think I have said as much as I know about plastics. I am not the expert on plastics. Our colleague Amanda has been the lead on our ocean portfolio and has done more reading on plastics. And I think anything that she would have known, she might have shared with the youth groups in the classes that were done over the summer.
Yeah. So, and I can address some of that later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. So I can talk more about the Indigenous issues, which Virginia is interested in talking about. So one thing that Creation Justice Ministries has been watching unfold is the executive order that was put forth by Governor Newsom in June of 2019 with an apology to California Indigenous people, as well as a call to form a Truth and Healing Council that would examine issues between the state of California and Indigenous people. And that council would do its work between 2020 and 2025. Nominations are open for the council right now, and they can be nominated only through California tribes. And when that council forms, they will follow some of the guidelines of the tribal consultation that went on this year about what to cover. And quite a few of the guidelines included conservation issues that would be of relevance to the Blue Theology as well as Creation Justice Ministries. So one of the conservation issues that I am very interested in is how we deal with public lands and waters. So public lands are, more than, I believe, 30% of the state of California. It's a really significant portion of the area that's under the state stewardship. And of course, as we all know, public lands are, were all at one time Indigenous-led, held lands. And so as we deal with the truth and healing process, part of what will be coming forth is stories about how those lands changed hands, what is being done with those lands, what is the stewardship and management practice of the government, and how is that consistent or not with the wishes of those who have traditionally stewarded those lands. And then what religious communities in particular would be wise to proactively think about is what is our role in the story. Now, this council and this process is going to be between the state and the tribes. But the truth is, because of the doctrine of Christian discovery, because of manifest destiny, because of the way that land grants have been issued historically, Christianity played a very significant role in how all of this history unfolded. And so our work together over the coming years, as this council unfolds, is to understand our own role in the story and make sure that as this truth and healing process is unfolding, that we are participating in the studying, the learning, the truth telling, and the processing of what, if any, story we ourselves have to tell about generational trauma within the state of California that our churches need to process. I'm very, very compelled by the breakthrough that this could mean in terms of racial healing, as well as healing with God's creation. And the project is just beginning. So I'm really looking for thought partners in California who are interested in thinking through how to help this project take shape, alliances that are strategic, effective, and really self-reflective throughout the state. And if that is something that any of you are interested in doing, I would be very interested in connecting with you directly. And you have my email address, so please email me. Close to the Blue Theology Mission Station, one of the alliances that I'm most interested in building is with the Chumash people, and Reverend Dan does have some connections there. So there is a proposed Chumash National Marine Sanctuary fairly close to where the mission station is. And that area has been proposed for a long time, like more than a decade, and it's having a hard time getting over the finish line with NOAA. It did just get approved by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, one more time to be put on the federal register for consideration. But it is just taking a lot of work to get it to rise to the top of the priority list to get this idea under conservation protection. And it is of high priority to the Chumash people. So this is one area where I see it could be really low-hanging fruit, I guess, to get going on this agenda of alliance building and truth-telling and healing around what needs to happen to heal our relationships with each other and creation. And so this is one partnership that we'll be exploring with Blue Theology Mission Station in the coming year. So yes, I can explain a little bit more about 30 by 30. So what specifically, Dan, would you like me to talk about with 30 by 30?
Oh, just tell us what it is.
Sure. So scientists around the world who specialize in biodiversity as well as climate resilience have looked at what it will take to sustain planetary life in light of the climate crisis that we are experiencing. And they have discerned that worldwide, we will need to conserve at least 30% of land, water, including the ocean, under strong conservation protections no later than the year 2030 to make sure that the natural ecosystems on the earth they have the ability to do their job to be climate resilient and to weather the storms ahead. And so the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, which the United States is not party to, but we still obviously track what happens with it. That convention is actively going to consider at the global level trying to make some sort of a international agreement around conserving at least 30% of different countries' lands and water territories by 2030. But in the meantime, this campaign is going to different levels. So far, 38 countries around the world have already approved this benchmark, this goal of conserving at least 30% of their lands and waters by 2030. And in the United States, there is proposed legislation in both the House and the Senate to set this goal. There's a resolution called the 30 by 30 resolution to save nature. And now, as of today, the state of California has, through executive order of Governor Newsom, signed on to this goal of conserving 30% of California's lands and waters and ocean areas by 2030. California is farther along than a lot of the country in terms of conservation, but California also has a more delicate climate than other parts of the country and therefore needs more conservation action more urgently. And we don't have to look any farther than the wildfires to see what the urgency is in terms of not only thoughtful conservation, but also land management and planning. It really has to be done well. So that is 30 by 30. Did that answer the question for you?
Thank you.
Okay. So I can talk a bit more about media, but I don't want to take up time. The name of the people, Chumash, yeah. I don't want to take up time talking about things you already know. So vote in the right people and it will happen. We are very preoccupied this month with Get Out the Vote activities. It's so important during the pandemic. The social service that everybody have access to their voting rights. Thank you for saying that, Carl. So I'm going to drop into the chat the 30 by 30 executive order that happened today, which is also linked to on our blog if you click through that. And then I'll share a little bit more information about the proposed Chumash sanctuary. I see we have a question. Can 30 by 30 apply to cities? That's a good question. I'm not sure. I think cities do have some jurisdiction, but probably not to the degree that states do. Even in California, so much of California's land is held by the federal governments. California can do what is in California's control, but the federal government has to also properly protect the lands within the state boundaries. Is there anything else we should go over?
Okay, well, I want to address Carl's question about what their church can do.
Yeah.
Okay, so first off, I'm assuming your church, Carl Vallejo, is already at some level a Green Chalice church. But for the rest of, and I know Lafayette is, but we do have a program within a denomination called Green Chalice. Yeah, Carl says they are. So, you kind of have a checklist of the things that you can do for your church to be environmentally aware and responsible. And of course, we would like to see more Blue Theology focused stuff. So I've already pitched to them what I'm going to tell you right now. One of the best things you can do when it comes to ocean issues is send your youth group. And if you don't have a youth group, put together a group of your adults that could come down here and visit. The youth are here for a week. We will occasionally take a group of adults for a weekend, and we'll lay out, discussions about what we consider the major issues of ocean protection and ocean stewardship, and things that your church can do. But we find it really exciting, as Shantha mentioned. Our primary goal is just to have these learning serving experiences to create a heart connection with the ocean, with the people who participate, and then hopefully they go back to their churches and share that and take on leadership roles. And this is the youth, to go back and report on what they do and to make suggestions to the church what they can do. But I've noticed, and this is what I was kind of pushing Shantha about, is if you haven't seen the movie The Story of Plastics, I highly recommend you see it, because it really talks about the importance of being on the front end, especially of the problem of plastics. And that front end is an area where lobbying and getting people concerned about the amount of plastic that's being manufactured is equally, if not more important than how much plastic we can recycle or reuse. Because the reality is the amount of plastics we're creating right now, we don't have the ability to deal with. We just don't. We don't have the technology to deal with it. And so one of the things that we will do here, and we'll do it with help from Amanda from Creation Justice Ministries, is that we'll do a little workshop on how to write an effective letter to your congressperson or to senators on how to best articulate what you see the problem with plastics to be, or other environmental issues, and how to write that letter effectively so it gets read and heard. And we can do that here with you, when you can come visit the mission station. Yeah, you can find the movie on Netflix. Isn't that right, Shantha?
I think so. I'll look it up and see if I can drop it in the chat. I did find the bill.
Yeah, I think there's even a link just to that. Okay. Okay, and while you're doing that, for all you Netflix watchers, since that's like one we'll get to do during a pandemic, there is a new film on Netflix called My Octopus Teacher. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. And that's more of a heart thing, but it's also the filmmaker. He's operating at a spiritual level that is really impressive. And again, it's just it really gives a real love for that ecosystem out there that most of us never get to see, or we only get to see through, a mask and a snorkel, and highly recommend it. Do any of you have any other, and use Q&A or use the chat. Do you have any other questions for Shanta while she's with us? You all better not be watching the vice president debate.
It's 39%.
Does 39% of the church land count?
So that's an interesting question. So I think the total land of 30, like if your church signed on to 30 by 30, that's interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, it would be a powerful moral statement. We are doing our part. We've set aside this amount of the area under our stewardship for God's creation to thrive. I love it. I think that's a really great story to tell.
Carl, could that be done with CGC? CGC is our church camp.
Okay.
In California. Yeah, I know we're selling part of the land, but even for the part that we retain, I wonder if there's a part that we could designate as, preserved land that we normally don't use for programming anyway.
So
something
Helen,
we can ask Outdoor Ministries.
Helen asked if we could also comment on racial justice issues. Obviously, that's a huge topic. Specifically as it relates to 30 by 30, I can speak to some racial justice issues. So the 30 by 30 resolution, both at the national level and at the California state level, is calling on people to think about conservation differently. And to think about conservation in light of environmental justice and who has and has not had access to the healing power of natural spaces historically, which has been done through community planning and zoning quite intentionally. So as we're thinking about where conservation areas are going to be built and who has access to them, we should be thinking about environmental racism. We should think about communities that are urban, that need park space. And, luckily, just in the past year as well, the Great American Outdoors Act has passed, and we do have permanent funding now for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which at least at the federal level allows money to flow to states, counties, cities, to be able to establish new parklands as well as refurbish old parklands. So hopefully that Land and Water Conservation Fund to get to that 30 by 30 goal, and to be able to do it in locations that are going to be relevant to rectify environmental injustices and racial disparities in access to nature. The other racial justice issue has everything to do with the truth and healing stuff that is happening in the state, and that is to make sure that tribal consent, not just tribal consultation, but tribal consent is part of the process of dealing with any tribe's ancestral lands when we're looking at conservation practices and who is going to be involved in them. Part of our work towards truth and healing is going to be doing some studying processes in the Creation Justice Ministries staff, as well as the emerging team that we're going to be building in California to understand what it means for tribes to be involved in co-management of public lands and waters. Practically, how is that being done, both in the United States already and in other countries? We'll also look at ways that the state has transferred lands that are unclaimed. For example, when a company goes bankrupt, In some cases, those can be transferred into trust for tribes to get first right of refusal for those lands that were once in their holding. So there's a lot of exciting things that we can do to rectify injustices and engage in this eco-reparations, which is an emerging term that I'm learning more about every day.
Mm.
Another question. Does the Truth and Healing Council affect the Pebble mine issue and Arctic oil drilling? Unfortunately, no. The Truth and Healing Council is being established only between the state of California and California tribes. However, what transpires in this historic first of its kind tribal truth and healing process could be replicated in other states or could be replicated in the future at the national level. And so in many ways, by engaging thoughtfully with this at the California level, we have a chance to be precedent setters to make sure that when we think about who we're going to be as church while this process unfolds, and we think about what it means for our relationship with God's creation and the possibility of eco-reparations, this is a real leadership opportunity. Does that answer your question, Kim? Okay.
Yeah. Shantha, what are some of the big issues that you're actually actively lobbying right now with Creation Justice Ministries?
So just to distinguish, we engage in policymaker education, and we also engage in grassroots lobbying, which involves educating people like you to be able to contact your own policymakers.
Okay.
So
All right.
I'm not a lobbyist.
So
To
you're
be a
not a
lobbyist, I
lobbyist.
have
Okay.
to register with the federal government as a lobbyist. We have to have a 501c4 operation. We don't have any of that. But what we do is we track legislation and we educate people about legislative opportunities to get involved. And so in the ocean space, one of the things that we are getting very excited about is a historic piece of legislation that is going to be introduced for the first time later this month. We don't know exactly when, but we're keeping an eye out for it because we've heard it's in the making, about what it would mean to take ocean climate action. And the ocean climate action involves building climate resilience through natural solutions, through planting more mangroves, through planting seagrass meadows, through having marine protected areas that make the ocean more resilient, as well as doing thoughtfully sited offshore renewable energy, and of course, the cessation of unsustainable practices like massive plastic use in production and offshore drilling and doing the things that are like the lowest bar that we can possibly do to protect creation. So that is going to be introduced in the House sometime later this month. And when it does, we plan to do a lot to educate people about it. And we know that in the next Congress, hopefully it has made enough of a splash that we can build some momentum to carry it further forward. So it's one area that we're working on. Another major area we've been following is just COVID relief and response and what it has to do with environmental justice issues. So one urgent issue that we've been following closely is the matter of utility shutoffs, whether utilities, both electricity and water, are permitted nationally or in different states to shut off for people who are unable to pay their bills right now. Given the COVID emergency, we have been urging Congress to pass relief measures that will protect people from those shutoffs. Virginia Farley says extending wetlands along the shorelines also reduces flooding inland. Yes, ding, 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 agree. We do have some coastal resilience information that people might find interesting, and I'll just drop the link for that. We have a really awesome fellow who's a student at Duke Divinity School who's been putting some materials together around coastal resilience. He's based in the Southeast, but they're relevant for any coastal community.
Helen asked if, yeah, you got that? The Law of Sea Convention?
That is something I've never heard of. I would love to learn more about what it is. I don't know. United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. 1970s.
Okay, wow. Yeah, United Nations.
I would love to learn more about it, Helen. I don't know much. I wish I could hear from you directly about it. Maybe we can talk later.
Yeah. Evidently, it was a United Nations conference. And so it was an international agreement. But
so maybe the last thing that
can,
oh, go ahead, Dan.
No, I'm just saying, I mean, I think that's something that can be researched easily, that it was an international agreement brought together by the United Nations. But I'd be interested to read it through and to see what it was. I can give, I'll give you all the link to that information.
Great.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll mention is just if you are interested in engaging with Creation Justice Ministries action opportunities on a regular basis, we do have a monthly action center where we feature things from our member communions, including Blue Theology and the Green Chalice Ministry. And I should mention that also on behalf of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, Reverend Carol Devine from the Green Chalice Ministry, as well as Reverend Dr. Ken Brooker Langston from the Disciples Public Witness Ministry are our two board representatives from the Disciples. So if you ever have any intra-disciples questions that you'd like to ask to them, they are your two people to go to. And we're ever grateful to the Christian Church Disciples of Christ for hosting our ecumenical ministry through Disciples Home Missions. It's been fostering great connections for ministry connections. So.
Boom.
Oh, thank you, Carl.
Oh,
I'm really excited about that idea
great.
of a church setting aside more than 30% of the area in its stewardship. I think that would be
so if we did that as something, is that something you could help us broadcast?
Yeah, I think we would find a few examples and say, this idea is catching on. All kinds of people want to do it. We're building momentum. I think it's a great witness.
And by the way, where did the 30 by 30 come from? Where's that? Is that?
So scientists who work for the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity are the ones who set that, suggested that metric.
So has the governor said that's what motivated him to do the
Nations?
Yeah. So has the governor said that's what motivated him to make the executive order?
Well, he did say that he is motivated with California being one of the major economies of the world by itself, just as a state, that it is a place of leadership that our state should claim to be among the 38 other countries around the world that have already said they're going to do this. So he did say that right up front.
Great.
There was California state legislation to get this done through the legislature, and unfortunately it didn't make it through the Senate. And it's a conservation issue that's very timely, and so he decided to go ahead and do it by executive order.
Wonderful.
But, yeah, the bill in the California state legislature was AB 3030. I'll send a link to that as well. Unfortunately, it's not going anywhere this session.
Okay. Wonderful. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. My question to all of you is, how many of you are at churches now that has never sent a group here to the Blue Theology Mission Station? Lafayette hasn't. Really? Okay. We'll work on that. And Vallejo? Are there scholarships for Blue Theology? On that. And again, we're doing that with Creation Justice Ministries, but we're looking for grant money to help us with that and with some other financial concerns that we have.
So
But that's a
Creation
good
Justice
question.
Ministries has found some resources, but we're going to work out with Dan directly. But most of our fundraising has connected to communities, making sure that communities of color have access to this ministry.
Great.
Mhm.
Oh, well, right now we aren't. So, Sierra, we're Jan, we're operating as if we will be able to do something next summer. And we know that that's a big maybe. What was nice, again, this great partnership we have. Forest Hill, no youth, but you do have some cool adults that I wouldn't mind hanging out with for a weekend. But Creation Justice Ministries was able to secure a grant that for 4 of the groups that, we had 10 groups signed up to be at the Blue Theology Mission Station this summer, big groups. And we, through a grant that was secured by Creation Justice Ministries, we were able to offer a 2-day online workshop for 4 of those groups. And it was pretty well received. And we not only gave them lots of information and challenged them to do some things, we asked create and identify a project that they could do at their church and do safely during the pandemic. What's the maximum number of adults on a weekend? If the adults are going to come down here and actually stay at the church, bed and breakfast and things like that, work with you on that. Our average group of youth that are here is anywhere from 15 to 25. And that seems to be a good group to work out. And again, we're not sure what next summer is going to look like. We'll do whatever we can to be able to do something safe if we can. And if we got to wait until 2022, that's just the way it works. So yeah, all of you churches in Northern California, Nevada, you're in the unique position that you could send a weekend group down here. It's kind of impractical for groups from Kansas, All right. Okay, well, real quick, are there any other questions about the mission station? And if not, I do have something I'd like to say about plastics. You know, Kimberly mentioned that we do have a Blue Theology Task Force, which is made up mostly of members of the church, but also from some local folks involved in marine biology. And we are wondering if we can put together some kind of Zoom programming that we can offer for small groups to have like a Blue Theology time. And I guess, you know, if looks like this summer, Creation Justice Ministries was working on doing an online Sunday school material that focused on the ocean, right? That was on ocean stewardship. And we were going to participate with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Jen says we could join a couple of churches, adults together on the same weekend. Okay. Oh, Jen, you know, you asked if about maximum number. Did you mean minimum number? Because, you know, we could do a group of 5 or 10 people. Okay, well, as we go on. We are brainstorming some ideas as well as maybe you know, one of these Earth days when it's reasonable, maybe we could invite the whole region to come to Pacific Grove and just have a massive beach cleanup together. And this is one of the proactive things we can do. All the water in the ocean kind of whirlpools so that anything that's floating on top will go into the center of the gyre eventually. And there are 5 of those on the planet. One, thank you, Carl. One of them is just out past Hawaii, and they call it the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And basically what it is, it's plastic that's floating on a top couple of feet of water. Normally you really can't see it unless you're right on it. And basically it's shredded plastic that's out there just floating. And you've seen the stories. I mean, I think the most famous is the video of the sea turtle that had a plastic straw up its nose. But when that plastic shreds up and becomes small, animals mistake it for food, and so they're ingesting the plastics. Plastic baggies are out there floating around. You can imagine what that looks like underwater. It looks just like a jelly, like a sea jelly, and those get eaten. I've talked to some of the marine biologists here that said they have found sharks, and when they did autopsies on them and opened them up, they found cigarette lighters and huge chunks of plastic in their stomachs. It's a real problem. That particular garbage patch in that particular gyre currently, at minimum, is the size of the state of Texas. Probably more like twice the size of the state of Texas. And we just don't have any idea how to deal with that. I was talking to a fellow from Ohio who swears to me he was flying back to the United States from Japan, and he noticed a different coloring in the water beneath the plane. The sun was hitting in a certain way. This is his claim. I'm just passing it on. And he asked the flight attendant, what were they flying over? What was that? And she said, that's the gyre. That's the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And he said an hour and a half later, they were still flying over it. That's how big it is. And that's how tremendous. So we share that with all of our participants here at the Blue Theology Mission Station. And we said, we don't have, because right away they go, well, why don't we just get some boats and go out there and say, it's twice the size of the state of Texas. We don't have enough boats. But I said, what is it that we can do as people who are right here on the coast in this particular ecosystem, and that was maybe we could do something to make sure we're not adding to the problem. So we talked about here in Pacific Grove and again in California, very progressive. A lot of your communities are great about banning plastic bags or plastic straws, although I've noticed the pandemic has lightened up on that. But the other thing that they do physically is just to go down to the beach and just start picking up plastic off the beach and making sure that it doesn't get washed back out there. And it's amazing the amount of plastic that we find each week when we send groups out to do proper beach cleanups. When we do those beach cleanups, we also document everything that we find. Not just the plastics, but any other materials that really shouldn't be going out into the ocean. And we document everything that we find on the beach. And that data gets collected by an organization called Surf Riders. They do lobby. And so they need that information to be able to report, this is how much material we just found on the coastline that potentially could have gone out into the ocean. And to use that to make policy decisions. So that's our 2 cents on plastics. We get into a lot deeper when we have a group here for a week or even for a weekend. Have you seen the '67 movie, The Grind? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've always wanted, actually, someday I will. I just want to get that clip. Because I think that's one of the first things that's said in that movie, The Graduate. The guy said, let me tell you something, plastics. I would love to have that as part of a presentation on what we have to say about plastics. Thank you. Collecting trash in the gutters and go into the storm drains. Yeah, right. And, it's interesting. Even when we have kids here from the Midwest, we tell them, you want to do something for the ocean, you can clean up the plastics around the streams or the rivers in your area, because eventually a lot of that stuff potentially could end up in a gyre, the way that the water flows. But again, I just want to impress upon you that I'm learning more and more about this, is that, the reality of plastics are, Dow Chemical and a lot of petroleum companies make plastics. And as our culture, which has already begins to use less oil and less gasoline, plastics are the lifeline for those corporations. They can always make plastics. And the reality is it's not even a demand-driven economy. They don't care if they think people are going to buy it or not, because if it can't get sold here, they can always lower the price enough they can still make a profit and get it out into the third world. And so I'm beginning to believe at some point we need to make compelling arguments as to why we don't need to produce so many plastics. And maybe as new materials are being created that do decompose, don't have the threat to not just the ocean environment, ecosystems, but also on land, that we begin to put pressure on groups to use those materials rather than plastics, which don't decompose. And there's something like 38 chemical plants to make plastics to be permitted. Yeah. And frankly, the one that scared me, because I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, they just okayed a huge fracking project that's going to happen in Western Pennsylvania and Ohio. All of that natural gas is going to be used to make plastics, which just absolutely blows me away. And again, the more we learn about it, the more upsetting it gets. So again,
Is that the one that's on the Ohio River, the cracker
Yes.
plants?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So not only is it using all that natural gas, but it's also endangering the water source for millions of people. Yeah. It's just the things we do for plastic. It's incomprehensible.
And again, what Shanta does, and again, the reason that Creation Justice Ministries, why they are sponsored by the National Council of Churches, and why the Disciples of Christ have the Blue Theology Mission Station is, we understand that protecting the environment is a Christian concern. And especially when we realize that the natural environment is a gift from God. It's part of what we call the great creation. And Disciples of Christ talk about it. The Roman Catholic Church talks about creation care. We all have different language that we use. But that's why I was very excited to see that we have a Green Chalice program going. And again, on behalf of those of us that live on the West Coast and now even the East Coast, to have that real connection with the ocean and those amazing ecosystems that are easy to not think about. And all the incredible life out there that's actually essential. And it is essential. And I think it's 3 out of 5 breaths that we take, that oxygen's come from plants in the ocean, not necessarily the rainforest and in here. Medicines, food, sustainable foods, the fresh water that we get, a lot of that's from evaporation on the ocean. It's just the ocean is so important for all the different cycles of life that we see that is a gift from God. And we understand that as people of God, we're challenged to be good caretakers of this gift that we have. And so we try to impress that upon everybody that visits here. And again, that's why we're so excited to have our affiliation with Disciples Home Missions, and then also this great partnership with Creation Justice Ministries. Can you show the beautiful ocean again? I promise to close with that.
I did just receive the text that my daughter is asking where mommy is.
Okay.
And if I could be excused momentarily, that would
You
be
betcha.
helpful. But I will answer any closing question that you might have.
Thank you, Shanta. And tell your daughter, thank you for letting us borrow you.
Thanks. I'll share a picture of her at the ocean before I leave. How about
Oh,
that?
wonderful.
We went together as a family to Carlsbad a couple weeks ago, hoping to escape the wildfire smoke, but it was just as smoky on the beach. But it was still a beautiful trip. Oh, just kidding. I don't have it on my phone.
Okay.
Anyway, here she is in the mountains, the California mountains.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And I look forward to connecting with you in different capacities. If any of you are interested in working together on the Truth and Healing project in California, I'm most especially interested in moving the ball forward on that. So you have my contact information. I'm also really happy to be in partnership with Blue Theology. Thank you for the invitation tonight. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Yay. Isn't she awesome? She is. Okay. I'm glad you all got to meet her. Let me, I'm going to close my chat so I can get to it. How about I give you a few minutes of meditation? I want to share with you, especially those of you that are, I want to check this Q&A. Those of you that are lamenting when we used to, what are the tiny balls called that are used to make styrofoam? They're killers. If someone wants to answer that, I know there's a name for them, but it's not coming to my mind right now, but they are, because styrofoam does break down, and those little balls look like seeds. And yes, they are killers. By the way, I can go on. Nurdles, really perfect name for them. It's an ugly name, Nurdles. Those of you that are lamenting the times when our region would have our annual gathering at Asilomar, and we would do that every April, and that was right around the time that the harbor seals were having their puppies. And I know a lot of you would come over to the coast, to the rookeries, to see the seal puppy. So I'll share with you a little video for your meditation purposes of some of the local seal pups. Okay, and I also wanted to share with you, there was a day I was over at the Coast Guard pier, and it was one of the rare times that I could see the sea jellies floating around. And so I got the camera on a sea jelly and just followed it around for a little bit. And we've used this for some of our Sunday morning worship services. And by the way, if you haven't had a chance, if you go to pacificgrovechurch.org, you can hit the links to find our Sunday morning worship. And because we're the church that has the ministry of the Blue Theology Mission Station, we use lots of footage of the shoreline as part of our worship experience. So here we go. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. Well, I'll take time for any last question or burning desire, but that's what I had prepared to share with you tonight. So I just want to say to you all, as members of the Christian Church of Northern California, Nevada, we're very, very grateful that you've decided to give a portion of the annual gathering offering, that you're giving a portion of that to the Blue Theology Mission Station. So we're very touched by that. and we're very proud to be the Disciples Mission Center in California. And so it's been very exciting to watch this grow, and it's very exciting to feel the support that we get. And again, when we're able to up and run again, we want to see your youth groups here, and we would love to have weekend visits from some of your adult groups where we can brainstorm together Carl's question: what can our church do? Because we're all different. We're all in a different location. We all have different abilities and passions. So I'm hoping we can all see that there. And just like Carl said, I hope we can do this in person someday. I do too. And I want to thank Jim for putting up with my limited understanding of technology, and for being so helpful and for making this happen. And again, thanks for spending it. Thank you, Jim. And so we love you. I love you guys too. Thank you, Jen. So have a good night, and thank you for spending some time with us tonight. Good night.